All right, Sports for Dummies here. Gonna try to make a video as quick as humanly possible. Winners, losers, who's better, blah, 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 blah. Now that free agency is kind of already wrapped up a little bit, there's still some guys out there, but for the most part, teams sort of know what their rosters are going to look like. Let's start off with the Giants. I like what the Giants have done. You got John Harbaugh. You go out and get Isaiah Likely, Patrick Ricard. You just go after Baltimore Ravens. That's not a bad strategy. The Steelers do it every year. It's a shot. Yeah, you go out and get Isaiah Likely, Patrick Ricard. You lose a really good wide receiver, but you get Mooney. You get Edmonds after you lose or you cut your linebacker. Still questions at offensive line, but you're better. I mean, you're headed in the right direction. Are you making the playoffs this year? I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if you sneak in there a wild card. I think it's all going to just depend on how healthy is your team and how good is your quarterback. Is he going to look like a rookie? Obviously he's going to have to depend on his legs a lot. But, we'll see how they look. But they're in the right direction. Let's go to the Vikings. The Vikings are already better. You with one move, just getting Kyler Murray for $1.3 million. You might have lost some players, but I don't think that's really going to hurt you. I mean, you got Jordan Addison, you got Jettas. You're still where you want to be, I guess. Just making that one move, you're already miles better. Let's go to the Commanders. You sign Adafe. On the other side, you get Chase on. You bring in Leo Chenal at linebacker, Robertson at cornerback, Nick Cross at safety, Tim Settle at defensive tackle. You bring in Rachaad White at running back. You're already miles better. I mean, you spent a lot of time and money on defense, as you should. And in my opinion, the Commanders are right back where they were 2 years ago, if not kind of better. The next biggest winners. Let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders. You got Tyler Lindenbaum. You overpay him by like $10 million, if you ask me, but still a good player. You bring in the guard Curtis, linebacker Davis, running back Chris Collier, wide receiver Philip Dorsett, defensive tackle Trevin Mae. I don't know how to say his name. And Joshua Miles at tackle. So, I mean, you're already miles better than where you were. You also got Naylor, wide receiver, Pay, at defensive end. Yeah, I mean, you pay a lot of attention to defense. You made a lot of moves. You got a lot of cap space still. I think, you got your boy Max. You still got Max Crosby. So, they're one of those teams that took a huge leap. And, following that, I'll say the Titans. They took a very similar leap. I think not as much, but they got a lot right. I mean, they got Nate Lynn, Cam Riley, David Ibuka, defensive line, Jacob Martin outside. I think they got a lot better now. Are they a playoff team? No. But they did a lot. And I think the draft are going to make the right decisions. You got a new head coach who paid attention to the defensive side. So I'm gonna say you got much better, but are you a playoff team? I don't think so. Let's go to the Saints in a similar kind of vein. I think they're not a good team, but you got a lot better. You're heading the right direction. You pay Edwards, the guard. You bring in center Rudons, running back Travis Etienne, and Caden Ellis at linebacker. I mean, just right there, you're already a lot better. You got good draft capital. So, I think the Saints are like one of those teams that is heading in the right direction. Are you there yet? No, I don't think so, but you got a lot better. Let's go to the Bengals. The Bengals, they bring in Jonathan Allen. That's a tricky one. That's kind of like a wobbler. I don't know if that's a great pick or pick up, I'm sorry. He's a lot of money and he's had some controversy, but I think he's a good player. And so, that's a good pick, but you lose Trey. To replace him, you bring in Mafe from Seattle. And you lose Geno Stone, but you replace him with Brian Cook. And you bring back, Orlando and Reisner on the offensive line. So, to be nice, I think you guys paid attention to the defensive side of the ball. You didn't really address your offensive line except for kind of enable it, if anything. But you got a little better. You got a little better. I think the draft is really going to decide. But I don't know. Losing Trey kind of hurts you guys. Let's go to the Steelers because they have a tricky. It's a tricky one with the Steelers. They keep Hayward. They keep Samuel Jr.'s. They keep Holcomb. They bring in Joseph Day. They bring in Jamel Dean, Brisker at safety, Darnell Savage at safety. How cool is it to be a safety named Savage? I don't know. I just think that's tight. And then the biggest one, they trade for Pittman from the Colts. I like everything that they did. I can't argue with any of their moves. Are they huge moves? No, but they didn't need to make huge moves. Except for at one position that they always need to address, and yet they never do. They don't address their quarterback. So they weirdly got better but worse. They're like the same, I mean, I guess they could always fall back on Aaron Rodgers, but I also don't love their coaching decisions. So I don't know. I don't want to, tear apart the decisions they made, the free agency moves, because they're actually really good. But, they're kind of stuck in the same pattern, even though they moved on from their coach, which kind of shows you it really isn't your coach that's like, I need to not have a quarterback year in, year out, if you're ever wondering that. Let's move on to the Patriots, because they're in a similar position, I feel, but not really. But you got your quarterback at least. But, they lose. They cut, Diggs, the man, the myth, the legend himself. They cut him, and they bring in Dobbs. They lose Chason, but they bring in Draymond Jones. They lose Hawkins, but they bring in Kevin Byard. Like, I feel like they've leveled out. If anything, they kind of got a little worse, but they're still the same team that they were last year. I think they're still going to be really good. They're going to be right where they were, but maybe not. I mean, I don't know. The draft is really what they got to kind of nail that, but they're still a really good team. I don't say all that to say like, oh, you guys are not making the playoffs, but I'm just saying. Let's go to the Chiefs. I don't know what's up with the Chiefs. You keep Travis Kelce. You lose your whole secondary. You bring in Kenneth Walker. You bring in Alohi Gilman. And, Thornton at wide receiver. Why do you need a wide receiver? You could, I don't even think you need that, They should bring in somebody in the secondary other than Alohi Gilman. If that's what you got going for you, you're terrible. Like, now you're making the Bengals look good on defense at this point. I don't know what you got going on out there. You lose a couple linebackers, some defensive linemen. I don't know, man. If I'm the Chiefs, you kind of have to address every draft pick at the defensive side. I mean, you got a couple first round picks, so I mean, it's not the end of the world for the Chiefs. But if I'm a Chiefs fan, I'm like, I think this window is I think they're shutting this window on purpose, hoping to open up another one. Which is still possible. You got Patrick Mahomes, so it's not the end of the world for Chiefs fans, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do not make the playoffs again. Let's go to the Texans. A team that did really well, and they really spent a lot of their money kind of bringing back guys that they had. But they bring in Montgomery, they bring in Braden Smith, and Evan Brown at offensive line. You bring in Reed Blankenship at safety. They don't re-sign their star defensive player, but that's okay. They did a lot of re-signing. I'm sure that will come. But, yeah, I mean, the Texans were already a really good team. I think they just got better. So congrats to them. I think the Eagles, let's go over the Eagles. You re-sign both your tight ends, Goddard and Calcaterra. He was good for you last year, so I don't, dislike that. You got Jonathan Jones and Willen from Seattle. I think the Eagles are the same. They're right where they always are. They're a really good team. They've lost some really important players, but I'm sure they'll address that and handle that in the draft. But I still don't think that makes the Eagles not a playoff team. They're all right. They might have gotten a little worse. I'm being nice by saying they're the same, but Eagles fans are some of the most hard to, I'm trying to say, look, you guys are the same for your feelings, Let's go over the Chargers. You bring in Keaton Mitchell, you bring in Kolar, you keep Mack, you bring in Dalvin Tomlinson, that's the big move, and that center you got, and you bring in veteran Denzel Perryman. I like what the Chargers did, and there's nothing wrong here. You got better, but barely, I would say. How about that? And you got solid players, but I don't think any of this is like making you like better than where you were. I think people still respect your roster, respect everything you got going on. I think you did all the moves you had to. They were all really good moves. You're not worse. You're still right where you were, and that was a good place. So now let's go to this team. I really loved what they did. The Panthers, a team that snuck up on everybody last year. They like what they got going on. They got a lot of young players that they really like. There's some key positions that they needed to address, and they went out and did it. They brought in Jalen Phillips and Devin Lloyd, and they bring in left tackle Walker, and they got a lot of depth. So I like what the Panthers did. They said, look, we were a playoff team. Let's just bring in some guys that were on, Super Bowl teams, and, let's put some money in their pockets and, like, intrigue them to come down here and, like, change this franchise and be, a team that's consistently in the playoffs. So I like what the Panthers did. I think they might have a shot at that. Let's go over the Ravens. They lost some key players, but not as many as people, would assume or kind of act like. And I'll tell you why. Linderbaum, Isaiah Likely, those were really tough to let go. And Jordan Stout is a tough one to let go of. He's a punter, but I think he's one of the best. You still have Mark Andrews at tight end. Also, the Ravens drafted Isaiah Likely in like the 3rd or 4th round. They drafted Mark Andrews in like the 3rd or 4th round. It's what the Ravens do. They always draft tight ends, and so did Kolar. Like we make them like every year. So am I going to worry about that? No. You address the defensive line. You lose Max, but then you get Trey, and you keep your 14th overall. And so that I'm going to say, we lose Linderbaum. I don't think we've addressed that. We brought in that guard center guy from Atlanta, and we bring in John Simpson from the Jets to replace Falale. So there we got better. But yeah, the offensive line they still need to work on. But you bring in Hawkins at safety, so you let Hamilton come down and be the game record that he is. You bring back Awuzie. You still got Nate. You still got Malachi. Like, this defense is kind of where they were. They're fine. I'm going to say the Ravens are the same. They're where they always are, where they're always going to be. I don't necessarily think they've gotten better just because they added Trey. But, I will say keeping that 14th overall was huge. That was really the win of the offseason, I'll be honest. Let's go over the Cardinals. You're worse. That was quick. Let's go over the Colts. You're the same, and I'm being nice. I like re-signing that white wide receiver. He's cool. I like him a lot. I hate the Danny Dimes, though. I hate that. I hate what you're doing. I can't lie. Let's do the Jags. The Jags, they lost some players, but I think they were willing to lose those players. I think they're going to be the same. I think the Jags are they're not heading upward, but I think they're still a really good team. I think, they can be all right, well, are they out of the playoffs or not? No, they can still compete for that. The Broncos, they spent a lot of their money just keeping their guys, doing what they felt they had to do to keep their dudes. And I'm going to say you're the same, but that's a team that played in the AFC Championship. So you're right where you want to be. Congrats to the Broncos. Let's go over Miami. You're worse. You're much worse. You lose a coach. You lose all kind of coaches. The best thing you did was cut Tua and sign Willis at quarterback. That was good. I like that. But yeah, you got a lot worse. I don't know what's to come for you. You are fighting with the Cardinals for the number 1 pick probably next year. And the Buccaneers, to be honest. The Bucs, not good. I do not like anything the Bucs have done. And, that is what it is. I'm sorry to say, but those are the teams that I think aren't going to be good next year. Bucs, Browns, Miami. But I'll tell you this for Miami, at least you got Instagram models and Clavicler or whatever. At least you got that to hang your hat on. I don't think the Bucs can say the same. But yeah, the Bucs. I don't know. I'm not trying to be mean to them. I'm just kind of disappointed in some of their moves. Let's do the 49ers. I think the 49ers are the same. You know, I think they got better. I like the Mike Evans signing. I like some of the things that they did. So, I'm going to say you're better than next year, but you just got to, the 49ers just can't stay healthy. It's always health with them every year. So, I'm going to just say, like, you guys are fine. You just got to stay healthy. You're your own worst enemy. The Browns are worse. You're worse. Don't know if I said that, but you're worse. Sorry. The Bears. Let's get into the Bears. You bring in Wills Jr. from the Browns. Sat out a whole year to get healthy, get his mind right. Don't know if he did that, but that's a tricky one. You bring in safety Kobe Bryant. You trade DJ, but you already got a wide receiver you want and like, and you bring in Contavious at the end. You bring in Khalif Raymond at wide receiver. You didn't have to do much, but you paid attention to the defensive side of the ball. I think you got better. I'm not going to sit here and say much better, but you got better. And you still have the draft. You still have a lot of options. So you could have gotten much better, I'll be honest. Let's go to the Bills. The Bills. You guys had a tricky offseason. Your coach gets fired for no reason. Some people might say not for no reason, but yeah, I mean, let's be honest. That was a bit harsh. If he should have gone, so should the GM, but the GM gets promoted. Anyway, he brings in Bradley Chubb to replace Bosa. I'll give that like a minor step up, but they're kind of even in my opinion, but whatever. You bring in CJ Gardner-Johnson. I don't think he's on the upside of his career either. You bring in D. Alford. That was a good move. I don't dislike that, especially at nickel. That's a good move. And then you bring in Geno Stone. Your defense needs help. You need Pro Bowlers. Your GM can't draft them. What do? You don't sign any. You don't make any real moves here, So I'm going to sit here and say the Bills are the same. You gave Josh a little help, with bringing in DJ. But outside of that, I don't look at this defense and go, wow, you guys did it. Like, that's it. You guys are the same. I'll say that, the draft, you could do better, like in the draft, you could change your roster, what you look like. But as of right now, you look the same as last year, which is still good. It's a playoff team. All right, this is the team that's really to beat, I think, in my opinion. As far as the NFC goes next year, the Rams. They already got everything they kind of need on offense. Defense was really the issue last year. They had problems at secondary, so what do? They go get McDuffie, and then they bring in Jalen Watson. You're already miles better. Not even miles better, but you're miles better than where you were, which was still very far in the playoffs. So, yeah, congrats to them. The Rams are, right where you want to be, and you're better. Seattle, they lost some players, but I think they're the same. I think they're going to be right where they want to be. They spent money on guys that they want. And, they're all right. They're going to be fine. They're going to be right where they were. I don't know if they're going to win a Super Bowl. That's tough to do, but they're going to be a good team, and they're going to be competing for those kind of things. And Green Bay. Green Bay, you might have gotten worse, but I don't know. I'm going to sit here and say you're the same. You've lost some people, but, I like what you did with getting the linebacker from the Colts. I don't think you have too many picks to come, but I think you're going to be right where you were. I think you're the same. I think you got a really good roster. You're a good team. So if I missed your team or didn't mention a guy you like or whatever, but that's what I got so far. Comment, let me know what you guys think. All in all, I think really no team to me is just done horrible things. I think all the teams that kind of people joke about, like the Raiders or Titans, I think they've all done really good things. I mean, me personally, I think this next year is going to be fun. I think I think there's some teams that, like the Chiefs that are kind of coming down to earth, and there's some teams like the Texans who are really kind of doing all the things to like kind of replace that team. To be honest, it's all up to CJ at that point. But you know, the Chargers. I mean, the AFC looks packed, and I'll be honest, the NFC looks really good too. So this should be a really exciting year of football next year. But yeah, I'm gonna let you guys go. Let me know what you think. I'm gonna try to catch this butt whooping the Dominicans about to put on Team USA real quick. So have a good one, guys. Enjoy.